Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Steve Leibowitz. Back in 1980, I was hired to work in the government press office in the Prime Minister's office under then Prime Minister Menachem Begin. One of my main tasks was to explain government settlement policy in Judea and Samaria, with then U.S. President Jimmy Carter none too happy about it. The U.S. administration, media, and public opinion were all against us. I bring that up now because from my personal experience, when Israel's best friend in the world chooses tough love, it can be a very lonely feeling for policymakers in Jerusalem. Let's hear from the President of the United States this week on MSNBC.
You and I are going to have a come to Jesus meeting. What do you mean by that?
What I meant was, it's an expression used in the southern part of my state, meaning a serious meeting. And it was, I've known Bibi for 50 years, and he knew what I meant by it.
So what's the come to Jesus part? Like, what tough love are you going to give to the Prime Minister?
What's happening is he has a right to defend Israel, a right to continue to pursue Hamas, but he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions taken. He's hurting, in my view, he's hurting Israel more than helping Israel by making the rest of the world, it's contrary to what Israel stands for.
What is your red line with Prime Minister Netanyahu? Do you have a red line? For instance, would invasion of Rafah, which you have urged him not to do, would that be a red line?
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel. The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line. I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them. They don't have, but there's red lines that if he crosses, and he cannot have 30,000 more Palestinians dead as a consequence of going after. There's other ways to deal with the trauma caused by Hamas.
Well, joining us today are two of my favorite guests of all time. Ambassador Dani Ayalon was former Deputy Foreign Minister and Knesset member. Rabbi Dov Lipman was a Knesset member and is now head of Yad La'olim. Dani, if I could, Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to start with you. The meeting of that Jesus moment is coming. Put yourself in Ambassador Herzog's shoes. What would be your advice?
My first advice would be that, to use a different term, maybe come to Moses' meeting. And secondly, I would say that there should be a heart-to-heart discussion. If not face-to-face, certainly over the phone. And the United States has Israel's back. We see. And we have to remember that Israel is not only the best friend and ally of the United States in this part of the world, but a strong Israel is a very vital interest for the United States in the region, for establishing or keeping stability, for repelling any attempts to attack Israel. Also, for different matters, if there is any concession that the United States would like to get out of Israel, they know Israel must be very much assured of itself and assured of the American support. And we see basically that even on Gaza, the U.S. is with us. Also, the interest of the U.S. is also to do away with Hamas, not only because it's a terror organization, which is actually listed as a terror organization in the United States, but also for the vision of Biden, of the American administration, of two-state solution. Hamas is dead set against it. Hamas would like to see one Islamic state with Sharia law. So we have a meeting, we can have a meeting of the mind and we can work together. But it has to be transparent with a much more closer consultation and try to be innovative or initiating on the foreign policy side not only on the military.
That's exactly what I wanted to move towards. Rabbi, we've all been involved in the Hasbara business for Israel for quite some time, but you and Danny and I were, you and Danny were also Knesset members who dealt with policy issues. Is Israel's current problem the inability to explain our policies to the world, or do we lack clear policies?
If we're talking about the United States president, there's no possible way you could say, on the one hand, you must destroy Hamas. On the other hand, don't go into Rafah. Meaning the people that are making policy on the United States side understand that if we don't go into Rafah, if we don't continue fighting, Hamas continues to exist. That's not good for Israel or the United States. So then I wonder how much of it is politicking, that you have an American election that's coming up, and that Israel has been explaining to the United States authorities what it has to do. But the president has to sit with Netanyahu and talk about, I need to say certain things, maybe even do certain things because of my Democratic base and re-election.
They wouldn't be doing the same even if there were no elections coming up in the U.S.? I mean, Biden certainly would be talking about a two-state solution. That's been his policy for a long time.
There's a difference between talking about something and actual actions. What we have to do on the Israeli side is continue telling our story and do whatever we can that actions aren't taken from the American side. And as long as we do that, he'll continue saying what he's saying. It's not good for us internationally, but at least nothing will change on the ground. The concern that's in the Knesset, which I definitely hear, is how will it impact munitions that are being coming from the United States. You know, the president jumped to Iron Dome. We're not talking about Iron Dome. We're talking about weapons we need to destroy Hamas. That's going to be our red line, so to speak.
He's worried that we'll use the weapons to also destroy or kill civilians in Rafah.
Correct. And we explain in every single meeting, and I've been on Capitol Hill, they know that Israel does more than any other country and army in the world to prevent civilian casualties. It's just a lot of rhetoric when it talks about how we're going about this war. They know the facts.
All right, Donnie, let me turn back to you. I happened to be there in Washington on that day that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to Congress on the Iran issue. He was not invited there by then President Obama. Might this be a kind of a similar payback move if suddenly Biden were to come to the Knesset and speak directly to the Israeli people?
Well, it could easily be. I was against this move, unilateral move by Netanyahu. It actually showed partisanship. And one of the, I would say, golden rules and really a real asset of U.S.-Israel relationship has always been the bipartisan support. Unfortunately, since Obama, it has changed, and Netanyahu fell into the trap. So it's more Obama than Netanyahu to blame, but still, we have to be smart. We have to be smarter and not all the time.
Well, Donnie, let me ask you this. Donnie, let me ask you this, Donnie. Would you advise the Prime Minister to go on Fox News and other American media and attack Biden publicly, or make comments that were very contrary to what Biden's message is?
No, not at all. We have to remember, although with all due respect to the partnership between Israel and the United States, the Americans are the senior and we are the junior partners. And we cannot afford strengthening ourselves from the United States. By the way, about Rafah, the Americans understand very well that destroying the 4 battalions of Hamas in Rafah is very important, as well as controlling the Philadelphia Road, which is what was actually the oxygen pipes that supplied Hamas from Sinai, from Egypt, all the munitions and illegal smuggling. What do they say, the Americans? If you go to Rafah, just please make sure that you take care of the civil population. Show us a plan, an effective and doable plan that you can evacuate those not involved, let's say, from the region, which is also Israeli policy anyway. So it's just a matter of miscommunication and mistrust. And why is it? Because Israel does not share with the United States, nor with the rest of the world. It's the government's idea about the day after in Gaza from a tactical point of view, and I would say the years of the vision ahead when it comes to the region at all. So what has happened so far is that Israel said initially no to every American request, whether it was with supply of humanitarian aid, whether it was with gas and oil and flour. At the end of the day, we surrendered and we did it. So what was the not only we allowed them to do what the Americans wanted, but we didn't get any quid pro quo. We didn't negotiate and get something in return. And this is where we are now. If we are showing the Americans a credible plan about the day after in Gaza, and also our vision to the region for the farther future, then we can negotiate Rafah and it would be acceptable by the Americans.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
Dov, let me ask you this. Does it concern you that the United States is meddling so heavily in our war? I remember in the very beginning of the war, when I was watching a football game, taking a break from the horrible news, and suddenly I get a text message that indicates that Biden is coming to Israel right then. I thought, this is too early. Let's fight the war and then invite Biden. Instead, they're micromanaging the war, aren't they?
Right. As someone who grew up in the United States and now lives in Israel, it is troubling the degree to which they are involved. It is. I do believe that they should be supportive of us. We have a joint venture, so to speak, against Hamas. They understand that Hamas is a terror organization. And the rhetoric that has been coming from American officials has been very, very troubling and has also, I believe, fueled a lot of the anti-Israel sentiment that's out there. Meaning when you hear American officials talking about the degree to which we're killing civilians, that we're not caring about civilians, that there are, no one has outright used the word genocide, but there's rumors of the word genocide being used. That's rhetoric which is so damaging to Israel and our cause. And yes, that does trouble me, and I would want any of those comments to be behind closed doors. Let's talk things through, but be supportive of Israel outwardly. That's why I go back to my point that a lot of it is for the Democratic base, which is very concerning because, like the ambassador said, Israel has always been a bipartisan issue, and now it's not.
Well, Ambassador, let me come back to you with this then. The U.S. is warning us not to attack Rafah and not to injure any more civilians. They want to advance a plan for post-war Gaza already that could advance normalization with the Saudis and also a Palestinian state. Are they delusional? And even if they are, don't we have to go along? At least it's a plan of some sort.
Well, first of all, we have our own interest, and when it's really a most vital, interest, when it's do or die, we can always stand on our principles. But so far, it has not been the case. When Biden talks about a two-state solution, he's not talking about tomorrow or not even next year. When he talks about the Palestinian Authority coming back to Gaza, he's talking about a revitalized one. And of course, we have to sit with the Americans and break it down. What does it mean, revitalized one? Because we have had already an experience with that before. And we would need to really have benchmarks that they do away with terror, they fight terrorism, they stop financing of terror, they stop the incitement, many, many things. Also, when it comes to the vision here of a two-state solution, we don't need to say it now. Suffice that Netanyahu would say, yes, we believe in a political process. That would be a long way to assuage and to allay American concerns and to work together with the Americans. And again, with Rafah, I believe that we ourselves would like to remove uninvolved and civilians before we move into the ground operations. And by the way, the Americans and Biden himself, in the beginning, in the 2 or even 3 months into the war, he talked about the cowardice of the Hamas going into tunnels and hiding behind the civilian population. The rhetoric has changed, not necessarily because things have changed on the ground, but because there is a growing concern and frustration from the Israeli government, or namely the Israeli Prime Minister, for not cooperating enough with the Americans.
All right, I want to go back to Dov and change subject slightly, but I want to give you a chance to think about it, because I want to ask you about the tricky ultra-Orthodox draft issue. But before I do, you had the all-important Yad L'Olim organization helping new immigrants come to the country. What's the situation like? Are there new immigrants coming here in this post-war period?
One would think that with the war going on and everything that's happening in Israel, that people wouldn't be coming. The numbers are quite high. Since October 7th, there are thousands upon thousands of, close to 10,000, I believe, Olim that have already come since October 7th.
Wow.
And we're getting a rise in interest. People around the world who feel maybe the country where I'm living is not the right place to be. They see the rise of anti-Semitism. They see the demonstrations against them. They see attacks on Jews, and they're saying, I specifically want to be in Israel during that time.
So it's ideological immigrants?
Absolutely ideological. We in Yad L'Olim from all around the world, from 40 different countries. There are thousands of Olim that are in touch with us, getting guidance, both pre-Aliyah and especially post-Aliyah.
I'm sure there are many Olim watching us now who could be in touch if they're needing assistance. All right, so let's get to that ultra-Orthodox issue.
Sure.
After October 7th, I thought that there was going to be a flow of ultra-Orthodox wanting to serve in the army. Now we're up against it. By the end of this month, there has to be a solution in place of some sort. Otherwise, what? What's going to be? Are we going to have an ultra-Orthodox draft that's significant or not?
So I don't think we're going to see any kind of high numbers in whatever policy is developed, but I do believe there's a trend. And this is something, I've been involved in this issue for over a decade. Young ultra-Orthodox, young men in particular, are seeing the war. They're seeing the footage. They're not in a isolated world anymore. There's internet. There's other ways that they know about it. And there's something inside of them that's saying, if I'm not really learning the holy texts morning, afternoon, and night, maybe I really should be there. I want to be doing my part.
Chief Sephardi rabbi is saying that if they're drafted, they're going to leave the country as though...
Right, but I don't believe that. I know people got into an uproar about this.
They may have to find jobs.
Right. First of all, employment is happening, and even army. There's a process that's taking place, and there's a change on the street level, which I definitely see and I'm involved with on a daily basis, especially with employment and then interest in army.
Politicians are going to have to come up with a solution.
Exactly. That's where.
Before we're running out of time, Danny, I want to come back to you. You're a secular man who was in the Knesset. The rabbi is ultra-Orthodox background. Such great sacrifices have been made by our reservists during this entire war period, and now they're going to be asked to extend their service, and the regular army is going to ask to extend. Can this be sustained anymore in our society? Don't we have to make a change so that the ultra-Orthodox share in the burden?
It's imperative for the future of the state. It's not just a matter of the military. It's also, I would say, they're sharing the economy in taking science classes. And we see today, when you talk about younger generation, let's say less than 10-year-old, 25% of all students are ultra-Orthodox. And you look, so in 50 years, we may have a majority of ultra-Orthodox. This is not sustainable. And also, as a secular man, I tell you, but I know my Bible and I know the Mishnah and the Gemara, there is nothing which is more noble than fighting for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. Never in history, Jews were ordered not to fight. On the contrary, it's a mitzvah. And there are so many decrees of rabbis. It's also from the Oraita, from the Bible itself. So I don't understand why this ultra-Orthodox rabbis, the modern ones, are actually, I would say, distorting the meaning of and the spirit of our Bible and of our faith. It is imperative that they will join force with the rest of the country.
I want to come back to Dov about that. I mean, so many of the biblical heroes were actually military personnel, military commanders, and victorious at that. Why is it? You're from that world. Explain to me, if you could. We don't have that much time, but what is it that makes it so that you hear people on TV saying, if I'm drafted, I would rather go to prison or I would rather die than go into the army. How is that even possible?
I posted on my Facebook today, people could see it, a soldier who said, I've been in Gaza for 140 days. I studied a daily page of Talmud, a daily chapter of the Bible, and other things that he did, including prayer services. They're still in a battle which goes back 75 years. 75 years ago, there was a battle in this state of secular versus religious, where the secular leadership did not want God, did not want anything related to religion, and the religious side fought against that. We're 75 years later, and we've proven that you can be an Orthodox Torah scholar and be an officer in the army. And that's why I said on the street level, they're seeing that. The rabbis are still in the old guard, still fighting political power as well. That's the base for their political power, as we're fighting for this. And
the rabbis that I know, or the rabbis that I respect, would love for the fact that their followers are going to the army to serve the Jewish people, even to risk their lives for Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctity of God, for God's sake.
I'll go further. The Bible itself says many more times than many of the commandments, it says those who go to the army, Kol Yotzei Tzava, over and over again. It's because of this. They would agree with what the ambassador said, that the greatest thing is to defend the Jewish people, the greatest religious act, but not if we're afraid that you're going to become irreligious. That's the battle from 75 years ago, which we've shown. We have religious battalions, we have rabbis there that are teaching them Torah, and the more that information gets to the street level, circumventing the rabbinic level, the more young ultra-Orthodox men will want to serve. It's going to take time. The trick right now is going to find what compromise will give us a policy to move forward, but with time, I do believe that change will come, and we have to keep pounding away on that message, that you can not only combine both, but that's the ideal.
All right, well, I have to say, Danny, if I could have you back on the screen as well, it's been such a pleasure for me personally to see you again, and Dov, both of you, two of my favorite guests of all time, two people that have served our nation in the Knesset, that I certainly hope to see back in the Knesset, both of you in the same party, because as we agreed before the broadcast, there really are very few differences in the ideology between the Dov Lipman with a kippah and an ultra-Orthodox background and Dani Ayalon. Both are lovers of this country that served us well and will do so for many years to come. Well, that's all the time we have this evening. Thank you to our guests, Ambassador Dani Ayalon and Rabbi Dov Lipman. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching. Let's win the war and bring them home.